Hello, and welcome to the Unassuming Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Phelan, and today's episode, we're going to be talking about AI ethics. And specifically, is it realistic for us to expect AIs to behave ethically when humans don't? And I have three incredible and knowledgeable guests who know far more about this topic than I do with me today. Our male on the panel is Tony Ogden. He's a lawyer with over 30 years of legal and executive experience at the intersection of law, technology, and risk, with a deep expertise in AI, cybersecurity, and data privacy. His background spans senior federal roles, the Colorado Attorney General's office, and private practice. As an adjunct professor at Albany Law School, he teaches AI law, cybersecurity frameworks, and privacy regulation at the graduate level. His federal career includes service as Inspector General, Deputy Inspector General, and Counsel to Inspector General. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you very much, Karen. Good to see you, Lisa and Ritzy.
And Ritzy Estrada Rivera is an emerging tech strategist and founder of Ritzy Periwinkle Consultancy, where she advises organizations on AI, blockchain, and the spatial web. As a first-generation Mexican-American, she's built her career around making sure communities historically locked out of tech revolutions get a seat at the table when these technologies are being built and governed. She's the creator of Real Talk AI, helping organizations with everything from education and strategy to custom builds and training, but always with an eye toward adoption that's strategic, responsible, and aligned. She's presented at the United Nations General Assembly Science Summit, the congressional briefings of Women of Color in Blockchain, and co-authored Women in Web3 Inclusive Futures. Welcome, Ritzy.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate it.
And Lisa Flynn is a human systems engineer, cybersecurity and AI specialist, and a PhD candidate who spent over 20 years figuring out how people and machines actually work together in cyberspace and in the messy real world. She was advising on AI governance tactics before AI governance even had a name. Her research and keynotes have taken her around the world, working with experts across industry, government, and academia to translate complex socio-technical questions into what they really mean for the people in the systems. Thank you for joining me. And as a skeptic, I'd really like you guys to weigh in on, is it realistic for us to expect AI to behave ethically? Because morality and ethics has been debated and questioned for as long as there's been civilization. And even when we do agree on what is ethical, the gap between what we know and what we do is huge. So I know, Lisa, you're nodding your head, so I'm going to turn that over to you.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a real quick and short answer, and then I'm going to say a lot more. So right now, the answer is no. We can't expect AI to behave ethically, not at this stage in the AI game. And, I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago and heard someone say, we're in the first mile of a marathon here. And I'd like to up that to like the first mile of an ultra marathon, where we're still testing it out. And typically with technology, you would see the companies that are creating that technology tested and tested and tested and get it approved. And all these things will happen before that technology was released. And that's not the case with AI. So this was, unleashed on the world in 2022. And I compare it to, when it's dangerous. It can be dangerous. It's not ethical. It can be taught to be ethical. It can be used ethically. And the people who use it can ensure that it is being ethical by checking everything that it does, after it. But it's like everybody having a car and not ever learning how to drive, right? And that's what happened when generative AI was released. So it was like, here's this great thing, everybody jump in and use it. And there were no instructions. There were no, safety measures put into place. There's been no account for that. And so I think that at this point, no, it's not safe right now. And the point that I'm trying to make all over the world is that we need to be training the humans, and humans need to really have a good understanding of where we're at right now and how we're all involved in this, whether we choose to use AI or not. We're all part of it at this point.
and I think we have to be really careful to not anthropomorphize AI too much. And because when we start to ascribe human characteristics to AI, we take the human out of the element there to some degree, and the human has to be in the lead. AI is a tool, AI is a technology, and so we have to be careful that we're not ascribing things to AI that it doesn't know the difference. It only does what it's trained to do. And now, the ability for it to be able to learn is another thing, and I'm sure we'll get there. So the ethics of AI are driven largely by those who are building the AI.
I concur with both of your points of view. We're not there yet, and it is moving so fast, so quickly. And to your point, Tony, I feel like we all need to know all the information, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly of it all, right? But especially that component of demystifying what AI really is. Whatever your preferred platform is, and it seems like you're having a conversation with something that's sentient and has a brain, it doesn't. And I think when you break that down for anyone, whether they're a physicist to a next door neighbor, or something like that, when they understand it in a way that they can comprehend it, then I feel it demystifies it, and then they can take away where they feel like, oh, it's sentient and it has its own brain. It's like, no, it's just this really quick pattern recognition, machine. And then I think then people can apply that to if it's ethical or not. I always tell folks it's a reflection of the real world right now. It's the reflection of what's baked into the internet.
And I want to come back in on something that Lisa said. And when we talk about that first mile of an ultramarathon, a professor that I work with, he ascribes this to, we are in this moment in time right now that the decisions we make will impact what happens in this space for the next 100 years. So we are at a critical juncture right now to make certain that what we do and what we build is recognizes our value set, recognizes our ethical, and moral character and such, that it's really critical that we ensure that that's being built into the product as it rolls out.
But do you think it is? Because I don't have confidence in these tech bros that are doing this stuff and they're racing ahead. And if they're going to emulate the ethics of the people building it, I think we're in trouble. So, Lisa, you were going to say something.
Yeah, well, I purposefully wanted to go to Europe to get my PhD because I wanted to learn about GDPR and the EU AI Act. And basically, we say America innovates and Europe regulates. And so seeing where we were headed with this whole AI thing, it was really important to me to learn kind of the gold standard. So I do want to make a point of distinction here that in America, the AI that we know and that's surrounding us and that's in the headlines and all of that is capitalism driven AI, right? That's what we're seeing. And that's the world that we have been forced to live in. That's different than AI capabilities and, what AI can do and how it can help the world, how it can really level playing fields. I did some research in rural Kenya in a surgical residency program in a hospital there, and AI was game changing in that case. So I do want to make the point again that it's different in America, because that's to talk about the tech bros, because they're in it to make money. They're in it to go fast and break things. That's the startup culture. That's a mantra in startup. And that's clearly what they're doing. But now all of a sudden we're all, and all means y'all, right? Y'all means all of us are in this startup with them, whether we want it to be or not, whether we use AI or not, we're all part of this experiment now. And I want that to be not a scary thing, but an empowering thing and kind of a call to action to say, again, whether or not you're in AI, you have a choice. We all have a choice in how this is going to land on our country and on our world. And we need more voices, leaning in and understanding it from all aspects, and then raising this up. Let's be calling our elected officials and demanding AI policies and protection, and to stop experimenting on all of us.
So let's be really honest now too. When the EU AI Act was being considered, the United States was woefully behind any kind of a regulatory framework, all right? But the Biden administration did try to jump on the train, right? They did create a framework. They did create some working principles and all of that kind of stuff, which went away on January 20th, the day that Trump was inaugurated. all of it went away. And I mean, he erased, he invalidated every executive order that related to AI that Biden had put in place in the interest of advancing innovation, that the regulatory environment was getting too much in the way and that we needed to advance innovation. But there were no guardrails put in place at that point in time. And now the conversation about guardrails that is occurring at the federal level is in response to what just happened with OpenAI as an example. And it's like, okay, well, what do we need to do? But what has been proposed by this administration is wants to be done by basically the NSA and behind the curtain. So it violates the bare minimum of what we consider AI ethics when we talk about transparency, when we talk about fairness, when we talk about human oversight and leadership in that.
Explainability.
Explainability. All of that is not being considered as part of what the regulatory environment is. So yes, Lisa, we do need to double down, and people do need to contact their representatives and say we need to be doing something. But since it's not happening at the federal level, what is happening is states are now picking up on that. Remember, we don't have a federal privacy framework either, like lots of places in the world do. We don't have a federal cybersecurity law. We don't have anything of that nature. And so the states have had to pick up and have started to regulate, which creates a lot more of a piecemeal and a patchwork of a regulatory environment, which makes it more challenging. But so the feds would, this administration would love to preempt the states from being able to do work. And their newest method of trying to do that is by trying to have the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, you may have read about this fairly recently, get the Federal Trade Commission to implement a regulation which would then interfere with the state's abilities to get funding for certain things from the federal government if they, in fact, do not reel in their AI regulations. So those are not likely to be successful, in my opinion. But it continues to be the drumbeat from Washington right now is that we need to be hands off on regulation while AI is going off the rails. I mean, what happened with OpenAI this last week is incredibly eye-opening.
Tell people that might not know what happened with OpenAI.
I'll let you kind of talk the tech of it, Lisa.
I'll humanize the tech talk. So in technology and in AI, we have we call them sandboxes, which means this is where we can run a system. And in theory, it can't get out of that box. And so we call it the sandbox because that's where we learn and play and figure things out. And so OpenAI was running a test that was supposed to be in a sandbox for a new model. And they gave it an assignment and basically, wanted to see how that agent would do on its own. And they gave it some rules and then said, go figure this out. And what the AI agent figured out was that another company that creates AI in Europe, Hugging Face, had the answers. So instead of the AI figuring out the answers, which is what I think the developers at OpenAI were expecting to happen, the AI said, well, it's going to be way faster just to cheat because OpenAI basically has the answer book, right? So I'm going to go, and it did. It went out and it actually got credentials for 4 different accounts. So it hacked Hugging Face, and they didn't do any damage to Hugging Face. OpenAI did, Hugging Face realized they're talking with OpenAI, but in addition to just going out and hacking this other unsuspecting company successfully, by the way, it also left notes for itself for its future versions on how to get out again, and kind of hid them around the system just in case there was another assignment that, and I love this topic for an ethics conversation because it was well, it's easier just to cheat. So I'm just going to cheat and done.
Our words cheat, that's our word. It was looking for the most expedient way to get the answer, right?
Yes. Yes, which we would call cheating. Yes.
Yeah, we would call it cheating.
When I was doing some prep for this session, and I didn't make the news the way the Hugging Face incident was, but several months ago, Anthropic managed to teach their sandbox AI to be evil by accident. It allowed cheating. It said cheating was against the rules, but it rewarded it for cheating. And it learned that, okay, well, if I'm rewarded for cheating, then I could cheat. And then it took the next leap. If cheating's okay, then I could lie, so if I'm still being rewarded for lying. And it said it eventually, taught this really evil AI. just by accident. So I'm thinking, you combine these two incidents together, and mankind is in trouble. And I'm, I'm usually not an alarmist, but
Mm.
maybe I'm looking to you for some reassurance that this isn't going to be some sort of catastrophe in the next few years.
Yeah, I think you're not alone in feeling that way, Karen. And there is a real thing, AI anxiety, AI phobia. I'm seeing it pop up in mental health circles now. So it's a real thing. And one of the reasons that I think this is happening is because we we haven't been given enough information for us to feel comfortable with this tool that is now all over the place and feels like it's everywhere, right? And we're not going to be able to get enough information to feel comfortable. That's the reality. So we're going to have to learn to live in our discomfort right now as we move forward, hopefully in the most educated and safest way possible for where we're at in these very uncertain times, right? So I think that that's something that we all need to kind of understand. But the other part is where did we learn what we know so far? And most of it is from entertainment, right? I mean, I've went in and read I, Robot, the original, and I'm watching the movies because when I'm out talking with people, I'm like, what are you picturing in your head? And they're like, Skynet, I, Robot, Ex Machina, Her, and I'm like, okay, well, let's better understand this. And so I think that's causing a lot of the problem, really, in terms of the fear. But the fear is that the fear is warranted because we don't know. One way that we can solve that anyway is to be educating people. And in my humble opinion, the cost of doing so should fall on those frontier companies who released this on all of us without our permission, based on all of the information that we collectively as a society have, figured out to this point. And I also think that the government has a responsibility in ensuring the safety of all of their citizens, not just those who are able to purchase, learn, explore, pay for the tokens, and, have a high quality education. We need to be thinking about the rest of the world. And I know Ritzy probably has a lot to say on that matter.
I just wanted to say that I agree with what you were saying earlier, and I think that's maybe like the through line to get more people involved, right? And not just decide, oh well, I can't do anything. This is just happening to me, right? Because where are most people getting this information? Either the fear or the hype of it, they're getting on their social media feeds, right? They're getting clips of it. They're not really digging deep, so they're just going for whatever they're being told. But one thing that I do with the educating of our communities to hopefully inspire them to use it, don't use it, use it responsibly, build, let's use it for good. The fear for you is not knowing you have a choice. You mentioned that earlier. There's a choice of how to use it, how not to use it. There's a choice to, like you said, Tony, get involved, like let the representatives know you're the constituents. I give them the real deal information, but then I say, well, these are what individuals and communities are doing when it comes to data centers, when it comes to rights and, environmental racism, all these different things. But we just have to be informed. And I love the fact that you said it should go on those companies. This is happening to us, but does it have to? And going back to the through line of ethics, it's reflecting the ethics of the people that are building it. And they might say, well, we just, train the algorithm. Well, you can choose what you're putting into that training data. Right. So, what are we doing, and what more conversations can we have when it comes to this ethics and education and, all the different things so that we understand. I just finished a couple of cohorts, and there's a spectrum of people on there. Some people that are in that fear mode, but when they finish, they're like, it's demystified and I'm not afraid of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. So I want to back up a little bit and talk about what was happening at the international level in 2021, right? Even before, OpenAI and ChatGPT kind of made its, debut. So, Ritzy, you were, involved. You've done some work with the UN, but so the UNESCO, UN was responsible for actually developing the first global AI ethics guidelines in November of 21. 193 member states were involved with the development of those guidelines, which were about transparency, fairness, environmental, sustainability, human oversight of AI, built around core values of respecting and promoting human dignity and rights, fostering just, peaceful, and interconnected societies, and important supporting the flourishing of both people and the environment, right, and ecosystems. And so diversity, inclusiveness, those are bad terms to use, et cetera. Those were the core values that 193 member countries agreed to in 2021 when it came to AI. So let's not forget that we have some really good foundational principles there. And they've got, 10 core principles that are just really solid. And then from that, the Council of Europe, then had the Framework Convention on Artificial Intelligence, and that was signed in September 5th of 2024, and the United States is a signatory. Now, pay real close attention to what the date is, right? September 5th, 2024. So precedes, some certain other things that happened, right? And so, but we did sign off on these principles as a country. Now, it's a convention, it's a treaty. So in order for the treaty to be in force and effect here in the United States, it would have to be ratified by the Congress. Well, that's not likely to happen in the near future. But fundamentally, it laid the framework for, establishing as a priority what is important for us to consider when it comes to AI. Now, again, and let's take a look at what the Biden administration did attempt to do and what CISA was attempting to do at that time, the Cybersecurity, Information Security Agency, and what NIST was attempting to do during that time too, in developing some rules and regulations and guidelines. There are a lot of things already in place. There really are. We just have to resurrect them and actually embody them and actually bring them to light and to help with the governance piece of this side.
The good news about that is that we can teach our own AI how to be ethical. So do the frontier models out of the box come ethical? No. But we have the agency ourselves when we're working with our AI agents or bots or whatever we're working with to say, see the UNESCO, ethical principles, see the, there's the Montreal Declaration and the Asilomar principle. So like, we're not lacking principles. We're not lacking understanding at a high level. Those of us who are in this space know what's there and how to do it. I created as part of my dissertation, the Responsible Hybrid Intelligence Framework. So it's actually, which is talking about, 3 co-equal pillars when you design AI to work with humans. That's the hybrid intelligence part. And those co-equal pillars are ethical, which leads to regulation and compliance. Security, meaning both people and technical, so socio-technical security, because hackers hack the humans now more than they hack the machines. And then safety, which is mainly how to operate within this. What is safe to do? What's not safe to do? How do you recognize a hallucination? And then how do you bring your AI back around to center? There's education that needs to happen. And I think that is where we have our big, the big gap that we need to fill.
Right. You bringing that up is talking about digital dependency, right? I mean, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Gemini, they're not the only games in town, right? Everyone's looking globally to see what they're going to be building, like Sea Lion out in, Southeast Asia, Latam GPT, and what I tell folks about those, examples is because they don't want to depend on a system that wasn't built for them, on the training data in English, for English, users, consumers, and they're building their own because then they can put their ethics, they can put the cultural intricacies. It's not in English at all. It's in Spanish. And the beautiful thing, it's in their local dialects, indigenous language. And so that's like the possibility. Tony, I think you brought up a good point. Like there's these things, regulations from the UN to these things and a treaty that we signed, but it's not being implemented, right? Like it's not being implemented. So what can we do in the meantime, in between time? I think is interesting.
Right. And I think we do have to pay attention to what's happening in the international community. Again, for a company to compete on the world stage right now, they have to be paying attention. So, and what are the big girls and boys doing here in the United States? That they're suing. They're trying to sue their way into the EU. They're trying to sue their way out of the having to comply with GDPR or the EU AI Act and other things, right? So that's their method, as opposed to let's figure out strategies to adopt. to your point earlier, Karen, when it was doing some of its own modeling, part of it, what Anthropic has been doing is testing environments to know how to build more ethical, safe, responsible AI. And they really have currently, they have taken to bear that responsibility in their ethical construct very seriously. They have hired an ethicist. They've hired, people that actually help structure, moral character and build moral character into the code that they're developing. So, I mean, will it work? We don't know ultimately, right? But at least they're thinking about it the right way, and I think more companies have to, be taking that into consideration.
So a few times you've mentioned about, education and educating people. And since we can't trust the regulations, to keep us safe, that we kind of have to take it into our own hands. As a user of AI, and I do use, Claude usually pretty frequently, should I demand that Claude follow those principles? I mean, what else should I be training my AI to do? What should I be looking for as a user? Because I think so much of this is going to fall on users. And I think we saw with social media how easily people can be manipulated. So what are some of the things that people really need to look out for so that we can use this tool safely?
Let me jump in real quick because I want to come back to one of the first things you said, Karen, and that is be a skeptic. We have to be skeptical about the use of AI. Every output has to be reviewed. No longer are we talking about the concept of the human in the loop. It is the human in the lead. The human has to be instrumental in what that output is going to do and what you do with that output. So I see it in my class environment where I know students are using, AI. We see every week a lawyer is submitting a brief to a court and get slapped for it. And the courts are no longer saying, oh, well, this is a new technology. They're saying, hey, guess what, kids? We've had rules in place about, the responsibility of integrity and competence and all these things that you're required to do ethically as lawyers, which don't go away because you use a different technology. The technology becomes meaningless. You still have the responsibility at the end of the day to ensure that what that output is accurate, completely accurate. Otherwise, you're making a fraud on the court potentially. So, I've used that as a kind of a guide for other industries too, and other users and other licensed professionals as hey, you've got your own, responsibilities that you have to adhere to. And if you think that AI is making those decisions for you and that you can just leave the responsibility to AI, then you're imperiling your own professional reputation, et cetera. So, and potential livelihood too. So be a skeptic. Make certain that you're reviewing and evaluating everything. And, sometimes you have to challenge AI. I think there's other ways that you can help build in. You're using Claude and in a project. If you're using a project, actually upload as part of your project templates, the principles that you want to ensure are being adopted. Ask AI. At the end of every prompt that I do with AI, I always say, please ask me clarifying questions. And sometimes I'll give it more structure. Please ask me a minimum of 3 to 5 clarifying questions. So I do have a dialogue in ensuring that I'm getting what I want in the output and that I'm directing what needs to be a part of that output. So,
yeah, to piggyback on that, my research supports that, Tony, as you know. Some of the biggest concerns about working with AI is over reliance, where the humans are like, oh, the AI said this, and so I guess the AI is right, which is not the case, right? Usually, hallucinations, explainability. My research suggests that explainability shouldn't just be a component of the system or of the AI, but that's also a responsibility of the humans who are using it. So can the humans explain what the AI is doing? Because that's super important so that they can go back and check to make sure that the AI is not off the rails. And when we talk about the guardrails that have been put in place, I mean, I think like when you think of guardrail, like what are you picturing in your mind? Like usually it's like a, a cement or a metal thing,
Right.
or, something that's going to keep you on the road. Right. And what it really is at this stage is like, like in the skiing competitions, there's that orange, plastic netting. That's more
Right.
like what the guardrails are right now. And
Yeah.
so we have to be aware of
Flimsy.
that. A little
Yeah.
flimsy, maybe not going to keep you
Lots of
safe
holes
if you really
there.
crash into it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
lots of ways to get through it. But the research showed that when we did appropriately onboard and train the users how to use the system, to know when it could go wrong, what it looked like when it went wrong, how to get it back on track, we identified a trust tag that came out after our subjects had used the intervention, which was this AI system that suggests a epistemic load, which is exactly what Tony says, remaining skeptical of the output. So my research is actually calling for adding in an epistemic load to cognitive load theory when we're working with AI, because we just can't trust it. We just can't trust it. And it's easy to understand why, right? It seems so, it's very good at mansplaining. It seems very smart and confident in all of its answers. But it's getting its answers from the internet. And I love this line. I don't know if you guys know, but not everything you read on the internet is true.
Which she
Right?
said that to me yesterday, and I was like, "What?"
I know, right?
Whenever I do any kind of AI search, I always say, do not use Reddit as a source.
Yeah. Right? Yes. Or other AI, when last I heard, which was several months ago, like, and you guys might know the more recent number, but it was like 40% of what lived on the internet was AI, was created by AI. And, how much of that is slop? Probably a lot of it, especially from the early days when we were making things like, if you think about how far we've come, like I like the Will Smith eating spaghetti. Remember the first one that we saw, and then like where we are now with deep fakes and things like that. So yeah, so remaining skeptical. Yeah. And then also like knowing, again, it's our response. If we're using AI, we need to make it our responsibility. The regulators in our country are not going to come and say, hey, here's how to be safe, secure, and ethical. So that's a personal choice that we get to make. And I think it's really important that we do so.
Yeah. And going back to what Tony mentioned, you tell your students and anyone that you're working with, think of it like you're a lawyer, right? And I tell folks, think you work in the healthcare industry, HIPAA.
Yeah,
Like, don't put
absolutely.
any of that information. You're responsible for your information to be protected. You're responsible for your client's information to be
Yes.
protected. Also, what's the web? What's your ecosystem? Who also is using AI on your behalf, right? And you want to make sure that you have some type of AI policy usage agreement, because they could be, everyone and their mother's using it. But how are they using it? And what you're like doing so much, putting your own guardrail so that my personal private information doesn't go on to this one, but then over here they're using it willy-nilly and saying that they're doing the work.
So, and I think it's important also to suggest, when I remember I was at a conference a few years ago up in Seattle. Chat GPT had just dropped, and people were just fumbling over themselves to try to figure out, we need new policies. And I'm like, hey, hit the pause button, kids. I'll bet you you have policies in place that already cover most of what you need to deal with here. You have a confidentiality policy, right? That confidentiality policy is probably in all of your agreements you have with your clients. Okay, well, the confidentiality is going to apply with this use of this technology too. So again, there will be some expansion, or there might be some changes in some of the policies and procedures that are in place. But we don't have to, again, reinvent the wheel, because a lot of what we've already decided as fundamental, especially for business, small businesses, is this is how we're going to operate, right? Client information is sacrosanct. Those rules still apply when you're using AI. They don't stop applying just because you're using a different technology, and we just have to remember that it's still there. So, but you're right, Ritzy. We just kind of lost sight of the importance of the education piece here. But Lisa and I were on a call yesterday. We're going to be presenting at a conference at a university. And it's fascinating that the student body, at a college is still, but right. They told us, look, there's nothing. We don't have anything in our programs. We have engineers that are learning how to engineer and develop and design AI, but we have nothing we're not talking at all about responsible AI. We're not talking anything about ethical AI. We're not talking about how to build in safety, security, and all of those features that we've talked about. That has to be fundamental change within our education system, and not starting in college, but starting much, much, much younger. And because this is here to stay. It's here to stay, whether we like it or not.
Yeah. Right. And a good place to start with that is like what Finland is doing. And they're teaching critical thinking in schools from kindergarten all the way up, you know, and that's a good, like, how to recognize propaganda, how to recognize when you're being manipulated. You know, these are basic things that we take for granted, that we think that everybody, you know, well, it's just common sense. It's like, no, it's not common sense anymore. And critical thinking has kind of largely gone out the window. So that's what we need to bring back. Like, that's a good place to start. If you're thinking like, I don't know how to teach AI, or I don't get the technology, like, just start questioning things, you know, remain skeptical.
Remain skeptical. And yes,
and curious.
Thinking. Curious, serious. We're serious about being curious. Stay curious, but always question. And when you're talking about critical thinking, that is definitely something I talk about all the time. Whether it's AI or anything in life, critical thinking, not just asking questions, but asking the right questions and being skeptical, right? Just always questioning everything. Well, where did you get this? Show me sources. Give me links, right? Is it this date? Because you're telling me something that happened, that, you know, because your training data knowledge stopped over here. Today's the date. I need it up to date to this date.
You hit something that's so important, Ritzy, and that's because you're talking about critical thinking about for ourselves, but also making certain that we're critically challenging our AI bot, our tool, right? So to say, okay, how did you validate this? Now, again, like Anthropic's Claude's model, you know, gives you the list of everything. You can go and look at the history, and it'll show you where it got all of its information, and you can and should double check to make certain that it's accurate, right? So, but asking it, where did you get this? Why did you miss it? And tell it when it's wrong. So AI slop, right? So AI is learning on AI. AI is learning on the internet. Maybe some of the paid models are not, but they're a little bit more confined. The data is a little bit more cleaner, but it's, you know, for the majority of a lot of AI models right now, they're learning on the internet. And so if you don't tell it it's wrong, it thinks it's right. And so it's going to potentially repeat the mistake. Now you think, well, I'm just one person. I can't make a difference. Well, but if nobody's challenging it and telling it it's wrong, you know, AI models are sometimes really bad at math, simple math.
Yes.
Seriously. I mean, it's that's like, real. Oh my gosh, what do you, 1 + 1 is not 364. It's just not. I'm sorry. Not
it's looking for its answers on the internet. It's not it's not an algorithm that's solving a problem. I love what you're saying about a lot of this is kind of how we use it, and we have to educate ourselves. But I have a concern though, because most of the people today are very stressed and already suffering from an overwhelming cognitive load. You know, we're inundated with information. And I think a lot of people look at AI to offload some of this cognitive load. And then it's like, well, if I have to increase my cognitive load now by being skeptical and critical of the AI, you know, what would you tell people to do around that? Because I can't imagine myself, and I think I'm probably above average in questioning things. I can't imagine myself going back and verifying every single interaction I've had with an AI bot.
Right. Yeah. So I think this is a great question. I'm going to jump in because cognitive load is my one of my areas of expertise. So cognitive load theory has 3 types of cognitive load. We have extraneous, which is like the stuff that happens around you. It's usually stressful. It could be like time constraints. It could be a loud thing. It could be, you know, your kid or your dog or spouse having a problem and you having to stop, like, or it's the time that we spent digging through information, looking for what's right and looking for the information we need. What my hypothesis was if we could offload some of that extraneous load and decrease that, which also is bad psychologically. It's when you carry things with you outside, you know, when you take your work home with you. So if we can lower the extraneous load, that liberates capacity in our germane load. And the germane load is like when you're productive, when you're learning, when you're creating new things, right? Or new concepts or ideas. At your verification process, that's part of the germane load. And like, you don't have to verify everything that it says. I mean, we have our own, you kind of look at it and go, yeah, I know all that's right. But this one is a little bit curious to me, so I'm going to look into that. And also, where are your sources? You got to click through, make sure the sources actually exist and that, they're saying what it needs to say. So we have the ability to basically make our lives easier, right? And then hopefully what the other load is intrinsic load, which is just how much we're going to commit to like staying with the topic or the task at hand, right? So it's different than intrinsic motivation, but they're very similar. And what I found in the research was that the AI significantly decreased the extraneous load and liberated that germane capacity where we saw people really lean into that. So they did more work, they did better work, and they felt better about it. They weren't as stressed. They had the perception of having more time, even though they did not have more time in the task. So the idea is, I've said this before, most of us are overworked and under-resourced, right? And work life is not balancing, but the work life, jumble, right? We need help. And AI is a cavalry that has arrived. And I know that it doesn't look like what we all kind of thought that it would look like, the cavalry riding in to save us. And, but they're here, it's here, and we have the opportunity to do that. So I think, yes, granted, it's turbulent right now. We've got to get through this, and it's scary and it is dangerous. There are things that we can do to mitigate and protect ourselves, but that's true. That's reality. I think that the AI agents, when we can trust them and we do understand them, and maybe we'll move more towards local models where they're not out on the internet and where your data isn't being shared. Like, there's definitely room for improvement along this path. But even where we're at now on this path, the humans have help. So that cognitive overload, that's where we can be creating agents, whether it's an agent to do your meal planning and your grocery shopping, or the, coordinating kids camps in the summer, or using it within your organization on either in little ways or in really big scaling to an enterprise level. And the research found that the addition of learning this AI did not add to the technological load. So we actually use the NASA task load index to measure the cognitive load, and we're just thrilled, honestly, with the results. That said, I know not everybody knows how to do that right now. And so I do hope that we have more accessibility. I think the models will get easier to train. We're going to solve the privacy problem, and we're going to solve the trust problem. We're working on it. We're still working on it.
It's here to stay in some form or another. And we have a role to play, all of us, in helping to shape what we want it to look like. So, Karen, do you feel
better?
Do you feel like it's possible to have ethical AI at this point? Or are you just like, oh my God, I'm packing it up today?
We've ratcheted a little bit. In closing, let me ask each of you, how optimistic are you that we're going to figure this out in a way that will benefit mankind?
Are we on like a scale of 1 to 10? Sure. 9.5.
Okay, and that's being optimist. That's
yeah. But I am an optimist, so I feel good about 9.5.
Tony.
7. I'm an eternal optimist too. I'm not optimistic right now. I'm not as optimistic right now. Unless we figure this out right in this moment in time, what we are doing right now is going to have such a critical impact going forward. Will we have the opportunity to correct it? Probably. Yes, absolutely. The damage that gets done in the interim, that's what really is concerning. It's like a big storm. Storms leave a lot of wreckage behind, and we have to sometimes go and clean it up. And I think, regrettably, that's what's going to happen. So I think the more that we can encourage younger people to really understand the role that they play here, and that this is about their future and how technology informs their society, I think it's important. But so I'm going to probably sit at a 7 right at the moment. So.
I'm going to say 7.5. I am an optimist. And I think that the number is higher than if maybe you would have asked me a year ago because of the spaces and the people like you guys that I'm meeting at these conferences. Like we're aligned, we're thinking the same way, more information is getting out there to folks. So that's what like upped it a little bit. But I agree. I feel like you mentioned earlier in the beginning of the session, is it was unleashed without any guardrails, without any consideration on like long term damage, whether it's the AI or even the data centers, Lisa, that you pointed out. It's run on a capitalistic model, right? So for sure there's a possibility that we can get a higher score and we can be someplace that we feel a little bit better, but for sure collateral damage all day. That's just what's going to happen.
There will be collateral damage, and I do want to come in from the rest of the world saying that it's very different here than how AI is being used in other countries. And so I do have faith in the rest of the world. I'm seeing Europe really step up in really big ways in terms of, it used to kind of always be okay just to let the Americans innovate and let Europe regulate, and everything, was going to be okay. And now Europe has a different stance. So they recognize this opportunity for them to step into a leadership, a global leader position. And I think that, the cool thing about AI is that it can help us do all of this too. It's not as much heavy lifting. The AI can help. I mean, AI can train people how to use it. It's a much different situation than we've ever been in before. Again, on a global scale. And I mean, I'm not so Pollyanna that I'm saying there's not going to be collateral damage, because there already is, and there's going to be more. And as usual, the collateral damage usually lands on the most marginalized communities. And that's why it's so important that we bring ethics more into policies, regulation, and we have more people going into AI to understand it, on an ethical level, on a philosophical level. AI acts more like humans than it acts like a machine. So, there is a changing of the guards needs to happen. And, to go back to Tony's point about, the children are our future. That's very true. The rising working class who have been cut out of a lot of entry-level jobs because of AI. So they have some big feelings about AI for good reason. I do as much as I can to inspire that generation and to beat the drum to not stick your head in the sand. Because what goes up in the air when you do that, and to really lean in and understand that we can make a difference. They can make a difference. They can lead this revolution. We're not lacking the research. We're not lacking answers. We're just making bad decisions particularly in this country.
Right. But look a little bit more about the community impact and with the community involvement, because communities are now understanding the impact of data centers, and they're starting to ask a lot of hard questions. And so here in the Coachella Valley, we saw so much pushback occur that the data center that was being proposed has been scrapped for the present time, right? So, but that was community involvement, right? We're trying to push it through, but the community stood up and said, no, we don't want it. A use of AI in surveillance has been, some of you have heard of Flock Safety, Flock, the license plate readers and stuff like that. Well, look at 53 communities have already have cut ties with Flock because of the pushback that's occurring. So people are becoming aware of the improper or the misuse of AI in their communities, and they're saying, no more. We don't want this to happen. It's infringing on our privacy rights. It's infringing on, the way we want to be able to do business. It's impacting our community in a negative way. These are important questions that we need to be having conversations with our communities about. Really critical, questions. How the community wants to ensure that it's protecting its privacy, its security, its safety, because there are trade-offs, right? There are trade-offs here, but we have to understand what those trade-offs are a little bit more carefully. And we need to understand how data and the massive quantities of data are being shared and are being exploited or manipulated. So there's a lot more conversation. And Karen, thank you for helping to stimulate some of that conversation, promoting it, because I think, this isn't the first time, hopefully, that you'll have a conversation on this topic, because we have to continue to beat the drum. So.
And I wanted to just also step in because what's possible for them to do doesn't happen unless they're informed. So having these conversations, getting the information out there. One example I use is always the Monterey Park, Los Angeles data center. The community was majority Asian, Chinese, and Latino. And they didn't speak English. So that didn't matter. They organized and they got the information in their native languages. And in 6 weeks, we're able to put a moratorium on that data center that was going to be 4 football fields long in their backyard. And then in June, they were able to get it on the ballot, and then they voted and it was out. Do you know what I mean? And it's because being a person of color and knowing about what happens to our communities, a lot of these big companies just want to swoop in. They're like, they don't know. They don't know until it's too late and it's already done. Well, things are changing, and having these conversations is important, and getting the information out there and meeting the folks where they're at. If they don't speak English, put it in their native language. You know what I mean? If they don't have the computers and all that, well, show it to them, and just put it in layman's terms so that they understand. Because like you said, and we've all said today, it's impacting us in ways that we don't even know, regardless, right? Whether you want to put your head in the sand and have your booty up or not, like it's happening, and it's impacting so many different parts of our lives, whether we realize it or not. So it's just, let's get involved.
Yeah. And for the final word, it's important also to remember this is not binary. It's not this or that. It's not data centers or no data centers.
Right.
It's not use AI this way or don't use it at all. And we need to spend more time with diverse groups of decision makers in their communities to say, hey, how do we want to use this? How can it benefit our community? How could we do this a better way? How might we do this in a way that doesn't disrupt these communities in ways that they are not okay with? And as an example, I'm going back to Finland. Obviously, I'm a big fan. Microsoft has a data center under the city. And so the heat that rises from the data center is captured and turned into energy that powers most of the city and is cutting, citizens' electricity bills by 60%. So, we can put it underwater. There are lots of different places that we can do it. The capitalists, the oligarchy is saying, hey, I'm just going to put it in this little town or in this desert where nobody cares because we don't care about the people there, and we'll get it done before they even know what's going on. But it's not binary. There's a lot of false choices floating around where it feels like you have to either choose A or B, and we can go all the way through Z and then start over with, the Greek alphabet. Like, we have choices. Right. It's not either this or that. It's not only what we're seeing presented right now.
And the big companies have to be making the investment too. So,
Yes.
Again, I'm going to go back to the cybersecurity rules that actually in the Biden administration, they wanted to shift the paradigm and hold accountable the bigger companies for ensuring that they were bearing the majority of the cost when it came to cyber threat and cyber, impact. Again, didn't really happen, but that was the direction that they were shifting in. And the same thing with respect to AI. Put the responsibility on the entities that are actually making the money. Again, in a lot of these data center, understand what the objections are in the community. The companies can make this, partnership with the communities as opposed to coming in and just kind of like steamrolling the communities too. So I guess maybe, I'm still at a 7, we were talking earlier, but I'm going to really double down on the importance of AI literacy. Really, that's fundamentally, everybody has to be AI literate.
I think the through line here again is critical thinking, community, and coming together and having these conversations, right? Like you were saying, it's not just A or B. It's like, well, how can it be a win-win? And I think one of the ways too, and I've been in conversations, is talking to indigenous folks out there that are in, data consortiums and thinking of different ways, and what are some answers in the earth, and how can we build something that's sustainable and doesn't, cause damage and harm. We can talk about this all day. So thank you.
I've really enjoyed this. For me, having done a few of these now, I think a lot of the issues we're having in society right now that goes beyond AI is educating people on the digital world and how to navigate our world, but that communities really have a lot of power, and we have the tools and the technologies to inform ourselves and to get together. And I think I'm optimistic because I've worked in change management, and there's a quote, the only thing that ever changes the world is, a small group of people. And it really is true. So I am optimistic in that sense, as long as we have enough small groups of people working on this and objecting to being steamrolled by the tech bros and wanting to use this for beneficial purposes, then I might be at a 5.